Hello and welcome everybody to day two of the fourth annual Hydrogen Aviation Summit. Welcome back everybody who was with us yesterday, and welcome fresh participants as well. Yesterday we had a really great session, absolutely fantastic content. It was a really joy to watch it all unfold. We're going to roll into a little bit of an introduction of what we've got coming up today, but just to recap a little bit for anybody who wasn't there, maybe kind of provide a bit of context for the sessions that are coming up today. So we started off yesterday with a really fascinating Q&A with Diana Burkett-Rakow from Alaska Airlines. Diana covered off Alaska's sustainability strategy, her views on where hydrogen can play into that in regional aviation initially, and some of the other key drivers she thinks are required from a policy level to move forward with clean zero-emission flight. Then we moved into a fascinating panel session looking at fuel cell development, how the underlying technology is developing, what the challenges are with thermal management, weight, and the kind of fundamental conclusion being there are no real physical limits to how much fuel cells can advance, particularly in terms of power density, and a lot of promise ahead as well. And then we moved over to talking a little bit about liquid hydrogen, which was obviously a core topic on everyone's mind when we think about larger aircraft and improving the volumetric energy storage. I think we had some great contributions from Jake Leachman and Angela Kren in particular, and all of the panelists, but a lot of positivity about examples of integrating heat exchangers into tank design in order to manage boil off challenges. And we also had a good kind of output, thinking that 40% of people feel that liquid hydrogen can be flying commercially by 2027 and fueling aircraft. So quite a lot of positivity really about a relatively rapid timeline. Then we moved into a panel session looking at electric propulsion systems, in particular power electronics, motors. And we heard that a win for electric propulsion systems in terms of efficiency is really a win for economics for airlines. So it was crucial that this develops at pace, and many of the panelists and the audience felt that the eVTOL market was going to be key to pushing through some of those hyper efficient propulsion systems. We even heard, looking way into the future, we had a little bit about superconductivity and motors, and where that might start to play in the kind of longer term. So a fascinating session there on electric propulsion systems as well, and a brilliant panel. And then we looked at aircraft integration. There was a real sense from all panelists that the key is, and you can see above me, Cessna Caravan. The key is to start before we can run. But there was, again, positivity from some of the panelists that even at the narrow body level, if you can look at something like an A321 and you can use that with an A320 capacity, we could be talking about a potential for hydrogen in that segment as well. And we've got a great panel actually later looking specifically about whether the technology can scale for narrow body aircraft. We finished off the day with a really good panel looking at financing truly clean flight, and we had some of our some great investors represented there. I think one of the key learnings for anybody who is scaling up a company or innovating in the space and is reliant on venture capital investment and institutional investment to do that was that, even in a tough market, a couple of the panelists said, if you're number one or number two in that market, and that area has particular tailwinds, then there's always going to be a flight to quality. It was a great lineup there as well. So really good session, but today we're turning our attention a little bit more to the market itself and looking at clean flight for passengers and cargo, what, where, and how. And we're going to sequentially explore commercial segments from the very first routes using sub-20 seat regional aircraft, flying zero emission with hydrogen, right through to larger aircraft in the regional segment, so regional turboprops and regional jets, and then looking all the way into that narrow body segment before turning our attention to something that came up as the elephant in the room for almost every panel yesterday, which is, of course, hydrogen production and refueling infrastructure at airport sites. So it's going to be a really good session. We've got a fantastic first panel coming up for you as well. I will just want to give a couple of points of housekeeping before we move onto the content we've got coming up. So first of all, we've got our expo area. So in between sessions, or if you kind of want to drop out, and I think hopefully some people have been doing this before, and will do so after the event, we'll leave it open. But we've got our expo area where we've got members of the ZeroAvia business development, procurement and supply chain, infrastructure, and then talent acquisition teams. So again, as I said yesterday, if you're looking to buy something from us, to sell something to us, you're looking to help us with hydrogen production, or you want to come and work with ZeroAvia, this is your opportunity to go and meet some of the team and have a conversation there. Another key feature which has been, I think, very popular and has helped stimulate some of the debate has been some of the polls. So with each session, we'll be running a poll, and the first poll should be coming up shortly. And that will give you the opportunity to provide some of your opinions. We'll collect those as well, and we'll publish them, and we'll discuss them during the sessions. So please do respond to the polls. If you're looking to pose a question to one of our panelists or the moderator themselves, make sure you use the Q&A function to do that. We're trying to get through as many of the audience questions as we can in these short, sharp sessions. For those that we don't get to, what we'll look to do is try and answer as many in our blog as we possibly can over the coming weeks. And then the other element is, do use the chat to share ideas and thoughts as well. Chat function probably won't get a question answered by a moderator, but there you can express, in a non-question format, some of your own opinions as well. So good place for conversation and discussion. Kind of the other final thing to just remind everybody is as well, especially everyone who missed yesterday's sessions, that we always post these sessions to our YouTube channel. So it will take us a couple of days, but once we've got them all downloaded and prepared, we'll get them uploaded to YouTube, so you can watch back any of the sessions you missed, anything you want to pick up on, they'll all be loaded up there on YouTube. And then I want to also give a final kind of shout out to our closing keynote today, because it was a kind of last minute announcement. We've got, I hope it's something that everyone can stick around for. We've got Rob Miller, who's a professor at University of Cambridge and director of the Whittle Lab, and also one of the founding members of the Aviation Impact Accelerator. Rob's going to give us a 20-minute tour de force talk through all of the research that's been done as part of the Aviation Impact Accelerator, and looking at what zero-emission technologies can scale. Particularly, he's looked very closely at the role of hydrogen. There's been some fascinating reports that his team have worked on with McKinsey and the World Economic Forum as well. So that'll be a really good session. We're looking forward to that. So without further ado, I think it's probably time, hopefully, to turn over to our first session. So in this first session, we've got Linnea Algren of the Next Web as our moderator. Don't know if Linnea is able and ready to take to the stage. And in this session, we're going to be looking at specifically the first zero-emission routes that can come into the market. Where can we actually start to see progress? What will be the impact of that? What are the challenges with getting for airlines getting this all in place and being able to start flying? Whether it be their regulatory, infrastructure, commercial. So Linnea, thanks for joining us so much. Great to have you.
Thank you, Dominic. Thank you for having me.
Brilliant. So I'll hand over to you to introduce the session and our panelists, and looking forward to a really interesting discussion. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much. So I am really excited to get to kick off the second day of the summit with this panel. Basically, we're trying to get into the nitty-gritty of what is essentially an aerospace revolution, right? And it's kind of like having a backstage pass to the making of history. And we have to start, well, small-ish scale at the very least. So this panel will discuss what are the challenges and opportunities for introducing small aircraft, the first to be available zero-emission, onto commercial routes. Where are the major investments needed on flying hardware and ground refueling infrastructure? And also, what more can the sector overall and governments do to accelerate the adoption of these technologies? Just a couple of housekeeping notes from me. So we will begin with some introductions, followed by questions from me, and then we will open up for questions from the audience. Please put your questions in the Q&A, not in the comment section. So now let me introduce my esteemed panelists. I have Brent Smith, who is a pilot by trade, has been flying since he was 16, was previously with Flybe, and is now the CEO of EcoJet, a carrier that intends to launch regional routes from Edinburgh in 2024 and then transition to becoming the world's first electric airline. So welcome, Brett.
Thanks, Linnea. It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay. And Tim Eyre, who is the COO of Monty, which is looking to finance aviation's net zero carbon emissions in two ways. So initially by financing the retrofit of aircraft in the 9 to 30 seat range for hydrogen, hydrogen electric, or battery electric operations. And then as they begin to appear on the market, financing the leasing of clean sheet design aircraft as well. Welcome, Tim.
Great. Thank you, Linnea. Very happy to be here.
And last but not least, I have James Peck. James has a long history working in aero engine sales and MRO, and is now the Chief Customer Officer at ZeroAvia, a company that perhaps by now, I hope in this context, needs no further introduction. So welcome, James.
Thanks for having me.
And the three also had some very exciting shared news to reveal to the world yesterday. Perhaps they will mention something about that as well. So we have both the airline, the lessor, and the equipment manufacturer perspective. And so I will hand over to each of you in turn. And from your point of view, what are the greatest challenges and opportunities also when it comes to transitioning regional aviation to zero emission propulsion? Brent, shall we start with you?
Yeah, thanks, Linnea. Yeah, as we touched on there, we had some exciting news that came out yesterday. It was a media day held down at Campbell at the ZeroAvia facilities, whereby our aircraft EcoJet will be entering the market, as you mentioned, early next year, in the first half of next year. We'll be retrofitting our aircraft with the help of Monty, who'll be financing the aircraft, and we'll be putting ZeroAvia ZA600 powertrains onto our aircraft. So really exciting news. It's one of the first deals of this type to go through sort of worldwide. It's a hard deal. So there's money that's been exchanged. It's yeah, as I mentioned, it's one of the first agreements of its type to go through. So yeah, exciting news that came through yesterday. As to your question, some of the biggest challenges and opportunities. So a little bit about the airline and where and why we're sort of looking to do what we're looking to do is probably the best place to start. I'm very, very personally myself, I'm very passionate about regional aviation. As you touched on, I've been flying for a long time, but it's always been within the regional aviation space. So when we look to set this business up or get it started, it probably traces back maybe 3 years or so. It was first iteration of the business plan. It was very much a focus on how are we going to ensure that regional aviation is going to be here in 20, 30, 40 years time. So then once we sort of set on the business model, it became very clear very quickly that one of the biggest pressures or pinch points that'll impact regional aviation in sort of the 5, 10, 15-year outlook is going to be the environmental sustainability piece. Whether it's good or bad, or however people sort of feel about it, about aviation and in general and its carbon emissions, people will most likely always sort of travel overseas by aircraft to the States, to Australia. But there is alternative means of transport here within the UK specifically, and most places domestically you can travel by train. But regional aviation is so important to communities, both socially and economically. We need to ensure and safeguard those services going forward into the future. So finding a zero emission powertrain or zero emission technology to support regional aviation services into the future was probably the primary focus for us in terms of setting up the airline for long-term sustainability. So it was almost if you want to set an airline up and make sure that it's going to be here in the future, you need to be focused on this. And that was what sort of led us to ZeroAvia in the end, and is sort of underpins, I guess, where we're the direction that we're taking the airline.
Great, thank you. Tim, would you like to share your thoughts from a lesser perspective?
Sure, absolutely, Linnea. And I think it's interesting, sort of moving on from what Brent said, wholeheartedly agree about safeguarding the existing regional aviation market and future-proofing that with this new technology. But I think from our perspective as well, something really exciting that this technology brings is the future development and expansion of the regional aviation market. We think that the ability to implement this new technology to benefit from lower operating costs to fly zero emissions means that actually there will be the ability to open up new regional routes to actually provide increased connectivity in different countries and continents around the world. I mean, we look at the US, for example, they've got 5,000 public use airports, but actually I think only 500 of them are used for commercial purposes. So actually there is instances where this infrastructure is already in place and we can utilize new technology, reduced operating costs to grow the regional aviation market. And I think in addition to that, there's also new use cases that come from new technology. When we think about, I guess, reduced noise pollution that is expected from some of these new technologies and the hydrogen electric propulsion technology in particular, you look at potentially new uses for cargo opportunities, later night operations where there's no airport curfews. And so we're really excited to try and grow this market, with our partners at ZeroAvia and with operators such as Brent and EcoJet, because it's such an exciting opportunity to grow. So that's really what we're excited about, Linnea. I think in addition to that, we're really excited about the broader ecosystem. When we look at this new technology, clearly it will require charging infrastructure, or in this case, hydrogen supply infrastructure. When you think about implementing that at local airports or regional airports, can we start to build a renewable energy ecosystem that can not only help with this new type of propulsion technology, but could then also be used for ancillary services, whether it's hydrogen buses at the airport, for example, transporting passengers to and from the terminal, or electric ground handling equipment. It's really quite broad. And I think this is the perfect time and opportunity to use this new technology to really drive forward the industry and the sector.
Thank you. James, do you want to share your perspective?
Sure, yeah, pleasure. So yeah, I guess those that know us know that we set about on a mission to decarbonize aviation. And beyond that, we saw an opportunity to go further than just carbon, but also to move to zero emission and and remove contrails and all those other effects on the climate. So everyone in the team here is passionate about that. And as a startup, we could have gone in any direction, but we chose hydrogen because we see it as a huge opportunity. The energy density in the fuel gives us a great potential to scale up. So we're starting with the Cessna Caravan, which is a very popular aircraft in its class, as Tim will tell you, with a fleet already. And part of that is taking the technology that's kind of available today, improving it, certifying it for aviation, and getting the aircraft into service as soon as possible so that we can learn, we can develop the certification pathway, we can then start to scale, because the Caravan won't make a massive dent on the effects on the climate. But as we start to scale the technology to larger and larger aircraft, we can then start to have a real impact. And our eye is ultimately on narrow body. That's where our roadmap gets us to, ultimately. So when we talk about opportunity, for us, we see the opportunity is huge to be able to scale up and have that impact. Beyond that, of course, there are other benefits of the system, which is this is not a high pressure, high temperature system with lots of life limited parts. This is a relatively straightforward process to convert the energy into propulsion. And so the maintenance costs are lower, the fuel costs are lower, and the maintenance burden on the operator is less as well. So there's not a lot of routine inspections that they're having to do on the aircraft. So in that way, there's an opportunity for the operators to reduce their overheads, their operating costs, beyond the entire climate initiative that we're pushing forward with. So sure, I'm going to promote the company that I came to, but I spent 30 years in turbine engines. And I came here because I wanted to support this mission. And as I say, I think the opportunity is huge.
So that's a win-win, basically, for environment and operators. Brent, you touched upon the safeguarding of regional aviation, and I think one of the dangers, of course, with governments pushing for less regional aviation replaced by trains is that we lose this essentially test bed opportunities also with the smaller aircraft to then take the technology into narrow bodies, for example, etc., that James also mentioned. And Tim also touched upon how it can open up new regional routes that are not in use at the moment and increasing connectivity. And as an airline, obviously routes is your domain. So what are the challenges when you are route planning for something like this with a technology that doesn't exist yet? Or it exists, but it needs to come to the scale that you will use it, of course, in your
of course,
in your operations.
It's a really good question. So the wider infrastructure in general is a big piece of work that needs to be taken into consideration. But we are at the same time, the infrastructure. How do I put this? The infrastructure is not the trickiest part of it. So it's a big piece of work that needs to be considered. But when you stack that up against what ZeroAvia are working on and working towards and accomplishing as well, at the moment, it isn't as significant and as big a problem to solve, but it is an important piece of the puzzle, and a lot of work does need to be done on that at the moment. So we're talking supply chain from green hydrogen from producers, there are sites that are in development at the moment, especially close to home here in Scotland. There is a lot of work that's being done locally here on green hydrogen production. It's ensuring that future fuel can make it to the airport and to the trucks, through the trucks to the aircraft themselves. So there's a lot of work, regulatory hurdles. There's a lot of work that needs to be done with our partners at Civil Aviation Authority. They've sort of turned to industry for assistance, and we're working very closely with them on what that sort of future legislation could look like. But yeah, there is a lot of work that needs to be done, but we're working on it, and we're making significant inroads into that at the moment. So I have no doubt that we're going to meet that everything will be there when it needs to be there, if we just keep working together on it.
Okay. Thank you. I will come back to the infrastructure bit in just a moment, but as part of the ecosystem, Tim, why do you think that leasing is so important in getting this type of technology off the ground? No pun intended.
I think leasing and financing plays a crucial role here, Linnea, because naturally a lot of the operators of this type of aircraft, the Caravan and soon the Twin Otter and these smaller regional turboprops, a lot of them are smaller regional airlines or smaller operators. They don't necessarily have the balance sheets or the cash flow to actually implement not only the infrastructure required, but actually the conversion or retrofit process itself. So where we see Monty is playing a key role is being able to facilitate this transition for those operators. We will look to finance the conversion, to actually pay for the infrastructure and install it as well, and include that all in one sort of lease or financing package. Because I think we all share a goal here and a vision to try and bring this technology to the market to show people that it does work. The technology is being developed today. It will be ready, not 10 years time, but in the near future. And actually it can bring these lower operating costs, reduced maintenance requirements, zero emissions as well. And I think that's really important. We need to all do what we can to help implement this change and bring this change into the aviation industry.
Thank you. Yeah, you say that everything will be there when it needs to be, which we certainly hope. And 2025, James, is your target for going to market with your first product, or having it in operation, I should say, not going to market, of course. But how do you see? Of course, you are a powertrain developer, but you are also something like a spider in the center of the web of an ecosystem that is currently being created. So what are the pieces of the puzzle that need to come together before that, perhaps especially from a regional context?
Yeah, sure. So I guess we learned a little bit from the electric vehicle industry, because sales of EVs was pretty negligible, and most of the existing car makers were not that interested in the EV market. And then Tesla came along and started building this sort of infrastructure for EVs, the supercharger network. And then all of a sudden, it was a game changer for the practical, application of the technology in its space. So for us, we're very aware of that. I mean, our aircraft can't fly without the fuel supply anyway, but we have to be focused on ensuring delivery of the infrastructure. So as a team, that's a huge project across multiple airports, and we've got hundreds of airports in play currently. But from a customer team perspective, which is my team, we take the individual operator, we map out their route network, and we put together a detailed plan of how we're going to roll that infrastructure out over the launch of the aircraft, whether that's conversion or however they're planning on rolling that out. So we put a detailed plan together of how to deliver that. It's not always us that ultimately has to deliver it. As you probably know, there's a lot of hydrogen projects. But for sure, we're very focused on delivery from production to the aircraft and the technology that's needed for that. And then for any airports where there isn't already production plans in place, we can step in and deliver that technology, including, very short-term deliverability. So the containerized solution, so shipping container with production and storage of hydrogen, we can deploy that to smaller airports for smaller usage very quickly, and then move that once the permanent install's been done. So from an infrastructure perspective, it's key to what we're doing. And then beyond that, of course, we've got a team of people of various backgrounds who have taken new products into service before, including myself. And we have a whole program of ensuring the readiness of the operator. So infrastructure is one, but also training, support, spares, MRO, all of those components have to come together to ensure that operators are ready to enter service with our product.
So there's always obviously some logistics involved there as well to figure out. Brent, one of the most advanced sort of logistics around is the planning of an airline fleet. So how are you thinking about, because you're planning to start with conventionally powered aircraft. How are you planning the transition?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Elena. So you, as an operator, you want to ensure that your services are going to remain constant with your passengers. You have a schedule that you want to meet. People, paying passengers expect to be able to travel on across the schedule that you put out at the beginning of the season. So for us, it's what you don't want to do is disrupt that service. So you don't want to be starting halfway through the year pulling aircraft offline to put them into the shop for the retrofit. So for us, we've blended our growth as an airline to meet the timelines that the retrofits should be available on our aircraft. So what we're looking at, what I actually mean by that is we will be, our actual growth as an airline, we won't be increasing our routes or our network across a period of time. What we'll be doing is increasing our fleet. They'll go in for retrofit, so there won't be sort of any decrease in the service that we provide to customers. What we will be doing is taking on board aircraft and retrofitting them straight away. And again, just once they're done, they'll go back onto the network, and we'll pull aircraft off the network and put them into the shop for retrofit as well. So that's sort of how you balance and manage that, the years where you're transitioning between the two. It'll sort of become a lower growth period for us as an airline. But what we're doing is increasing our increasing our resilience to sort of the social and governmental pressures that might face the regional aviation industry in the next 5 to 10 year time.
Yeah, so you're playing the long game.
Yeah, you have to. I mean, we're lucky that we are starting with a clean sheet airline. We don't have any sort of legacy baggage that we're carrying into it. We've been gearing up for this for sort of 3 years now. The focus for us as an airline has been on this and delivering this. So yeah, we've sort of played the long game, but I say the long game, we're not far away. We really aren't too far away. So our focus has been on this from day one. It needs to be. So yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, EcoJet is obviously a very special airline in this case, but I'm wondering, Tim, how have you seen the readiness from airlines in general to adapt to this technology as it comes along?
Yeah, sure, Linnea. So I think it's really interesting from what we've seen that you do get quite a broad spectrum of operators and airlines in terms of their vision and future, thinking about this new technology. Clearly, EcoJet and Brenton and the guys in the team there are one of the forward thinkers in this space, looking to launch and be a green airline. We do see other operators who we work with moving towards that as well. A lot of them are facing their own sort of environmental or social pressures. For example, we lease aircraft in places like the Maldives or Thailand or parts of the world where actually there are environmental pressures today from rising sea levels. And so we do see a big shift in momentum and I guess ambition to be flying this type of technology. And I think that's really great to see. We're trying to, as an industry and even this group here, show people that it's not really a case of if this technology will be approved and certified, but more when. And I think it's great to see, as I say, operators like Brent and EcoJet, but also others coming along with us on this journey, realizing that this is a viable propulsion technology. And I think as this technology and propulsion system gets certified, we will only see that momentum start to build and more operators look to move this way. Because I really think that this is, the future of our industry, being zero emission and being able to continue the success that our industry has had in the past.
Thank you. We don't have any airport representative with us, but perhaps if James, I mean, you have been working with and having partnerships with several airports. Now, how would you say that the level of readiness for hydrogen propulsion differs between airports?
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge question because it varies massively for different parts of the world and different size of airports for sure. There are parts of the world that is very much advanced in this space. We announced an agreement earlier this year with an operator in Sweden that brought together hydrogen production, the airport and the airline to look at projects in Sweden. And, they're like, we've got hydrogen today, where do you want it? It's like they're so ready for it. So there are parts of the world that are very good, and then there's other parts of the world that aren't quite there yet, which is why we have a whole infrastructure team that's engaging with those airports to help them through their strategy. Because it is hard for the airports because they've got people talking about wanting to charge aircraft, they've got people talking about SAF and people talking about hydrogen. So they have to think about what's coming and how to develop their strategy. But, hydrogen can be used, and it is probably the best way ultimately to produce SAF. So SAF is continuing for the large aircraft then to produce hydrogen on site and have it used in multiple cases, including other transportation. There's a huge advantage there. And also the opportunity to generate additional revenue as an airport. So most airports are certainly looking at this in detail and trying to figure out, should they produce locally, should they use their own footprint, should they bring it in, and consider their own strategy. And we support each of those with helping develop that strategy. But primarily, it is a huge opportunity for most of the airports. But as I say, with the caravan-sized aircraft, a lot of those are flying out of very small airports that, they won't necessarily see the scale up of hydrogen demand. So that's why we look at things like the deployable containerized solution. But also there's large scale production planned in the US. So it may be better to actually bring it in. If there's large scale production pretty close, it'll be brought in. So various, I guess, is the answer, depending on the airport location, jurisdictions. But as I say, we're rolling out across a number of airports, and then as the chief of the customer side of things is ensuring that my customer and their route network is captured, and ensuring we can have fuel availability along the route network. That's my primary aim with each operator.
Thank you. We've got hydrogen today. Where do you want it? I think that would be the ideal response, right? Unfortunately, obviously, with green hydrogen production, that is far from being the case. So I will put the question to all of you, I think. So what can policymakers do to support the ramp up of zero emission regional operations, including green hydrogen production? Anyone feel compelled to start?
I can go again if you like. That's obviously a question that we need to think about. But yeah, I guess I've talked about the airports, airside. So we need the authorities to be supporting a new fuel source. So new technology, new refueling, new procedures, airside. So that has to be supported. And of course, all the new processes in terms of safety at the refueling and handling of a different medium, if you like, has to be captured. So we don't want those regulatory effects to be delaying things for sure. So that's why from an operator rollout, we want to get into those jurisdictions as soon as possible and start having those conversations. Aside from that, of course, we're trying to certify a whole new technology. So for us, for sure, the support of those bodies that are going to type certify or accept the CAA certification of our engine in different jurisdictions. We again don't want that to be a bottleneck for delivery of the technology. So for us, I think they're key supports. And then the last bit, I guess, is funding. So we can accelerate this and make it a huge opportunity for each country to capitalize on the technology if there's investment locally. So I guess that's the last piece of the puzzle for us.
So it is a really good question. And just to sort of follow on from James there as well, I mean, I can't sort of speak for even sort of probably EASA now, but or sort of our friends across the pond at the FAA, but specifically here in the UK with the CAA, they have a really good innovation team, and they are working very closely with industry at the moment to sort of start working on best practices, regulations that they can bring in place. But there's a lot of work that needs to be done there, but like I mentioned earlier, it is being done. So if there is, I think green hydrogen is going to be expensive. We're catering for that as an airline. We've got that in our financial models and everything like that. But if there are subsidies, would certainly go an awfully long way to making this a reality and bringing this, ensuring that not just us, but other operators as well are going to have the ability and the access to the fuel too. So for us as an airline, we don't see it. There's a commercial opportunity here by being sort of first to market, obviously, but we want to see the whole industry grow and move towards green hydrogen. It'll bring the price of fuel down for us. It creates a bigger ecosystem that will open up more routes for us as well. If other operators across different parts of the UK are all moving towards green hydrogen, so we want to be driving the change at the front of the change, EcoJet. We want to be pushing the rest of the industry along with us, but we don't want to be the only one. So I think making the fuel accessible to everybody, we're accounting for it. As I said, we're a clean sheet airline. We can start accounting for that now, but we need the rest of the industry to move along with us. So it's not just the regulatory body, but ensuring that other operators have access to it too.
Yeah, no, I would completely echo that, Brent, as well. From a lessor perspective, I think, you know, we clearly see that green hydrogen is growing as an industry in places like the UK. Clearly, for us as a lessor, we lease aircraft in pretty much every jurisdiction around the world, and that's not the case everywhere. And so it's really, how do we get the support of you know, regional, national government to help, as you say, subsidize the cost of green hydrogen, to help encourage the industry to move towards this as a fuel source, to help support this transition, because a lot of our operators in particular are worried about where they get the hydrogen, what that cost is going to be, the security of supply going forward. And I think we have seen some more investment coming into that area, but I think there needs to be more of that going forward. And it needs to be not just from the public, from governments either, but also private investment as well. So it's been great to see that starting to ramp up and starting to gain momentum. But I think if we really want to push this technology forward into the future as an industry, as a group, we all need to support that supply and the provision of the green hydrogen.
Yeah, because obviously it's not just aviation that's going to want green hydrogen. So it needs to supply a whole range of industries, right, that are difficult to decarbonize. In connection with that, it's along the lines of the same topic, but I'm going to lift a question here from Roy, who says that within the current society, it seems that governments and large companies are still very skeptical about hydrogen as a solution for the energy crisis. Though he says that he keeps seeing these amazing initiatives like ZeroAvia, which clearly show great solutions to fight climate change. Why do you think that skepticism is still rooted in these institutions? Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
James, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I mean, we face a lot of that every day in the business we're in, right? Because there's always going to be the hydrogen bashing crowd or any sort of new technology. Like I mentioned, I've spent 30 years in turbines. I love aircraft and I love turbine engines, but we have to face reality. We have to change. We're not going to wake up tomorrow and suddenly find that, do you know what? All along, we could just use tap water to run our aircraft. Wouldn't that be great? The reality is, this is hard. We have to develop new technologies, and it takes time and it takes money and it takes a lot of very clever people, much cleverer than me, to do it. The reality is, we started on a hydrogen journey because it has the energy density, it has the potential to scale up and deliver. Of course, there's huge challenges for us in terms of improving that technology over the next decade or so, and being able to scale it up, and the infrastructure and the certification. But we have a plan, we're on that plan, and everything is going really well. We're moving very quickly with the development of the technology and proving what it can deliver. So, you know, there's always going to be people that just want to say it's not the solution, but for us, it's definitely the best solution. And, you know, the more collaboration there is in this space, so we're working with airframers and airports and energy companies, and of course the operators and the financiers, so we can all pull together to deliver this, and it's totally achievable. So that's why we're on this mission.
Did anybody else want to add anything? Yeah, Tim,
well, I think all I'd add, Linnea, is I think that's what's so great about, I think, what we on this group are trying to do, and ZeroAvia, starting with the caravan and then ramping up. You know, we are trying to show people that this technology does work. You know, it can reduce emissions. It can be available to operators. You know, it can be a massive opportunity to grow the industry, to reduce emissions. You know, just because something is difficult and a challenge doesn't mean it's not the right thing to do. You know, we need to change as an industry. We have always been one of the, you know, hardest industries to abate, but we are seeing now every day more momentum, new changes, new technology, and this is the right thing to do. And I think we're all excited, and that's the reason we're here, to try and bring this transition and this change about. So I think, you know, we could be, say, 18 months or less away from actually showing people that this is the, you know, the future, and this can be done. And I think that's incredibly exciting. Yes, it requires a lot of work, a lot of different groups collaborating and different partnerships, but we think it can be done, and we're excited to do it, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to follow on again from Tim there, it is, I don't think anybody here, especially given what we've sort of the relationship that we have, I don't think anybody here underestimates how big an achievement this will be when we all do eventually get aircraft flying. I saw a comment just pop up before from somebody. I spent 9 hours of my week last week in calls specifically on supply chain of green hydrogen. Do we truck it? Does it get piped? That sort of thing. Nothing is being underestimated at the moment. There's an awful lot of work that's happening. We've got a team that are sort of focusing very specifically on solving the infrastructure, on working through the infrastructure problem. It's a huge opportunity for us, and I think it's the only way that regional, I was going to say aviation in general, but I think the wider aviation, I do think it's probably correct to say the wider aviation, it does sort of survive. Regional aviation especially, it's the only way that we survive is as an industry, is to move towards zero emission technology, and the sooner the better for that. But there's an awful lot of work that needs to be done on it, but it's being done.
Thank you. On that note of infrastructure, again, I'm going to go to Todd's question. She says it's a chicken and egg situation. We touched upon obviously the fuel supply a little bit in the US as well before, James, but does regional fuel supply plans begin before future aircraft hub selection? In the US East Coast, he says, in particular, how do you see fuel production deployment, and is there a work group outside of the H2 hubs, and how could his SAF/hydrogen startup engage with that in that case? James,
Yeah,
I would say that's for you.
Yeah, as I mentioned, we have a separate infrastructure team because it's a very niche area. So we've got, people that are from the large manufacturers that have come and joined us. So Shell is one that's, was an investor in us as well, but also a partner in developing some of that infrastructure. So that team is completely focused on delivering that infrastructure, and it's big in terms of, the challenge ultimately overall, but also there's lots of different parts. So some of it is about engaging on the hydrogen hubs, but also all the airports and all as I say, their individual strategies there. Producers who are looking to produce hydrogen as well. So again, we've got Neom investing in us that's looking to be a fairly substantial producer of hydrogen as well. So the infrastructure team is working with multiple parties in lots of places. As I mentioned, for me, I have an operator with a network. We need to make sure that there's availability across that network. And for each airport on that network, it could be a different answer. It could be that, that's part of a hub solution, that's part of an airport strategy, that's us deploying the technology with a partner. Either is possible. For me, we make sure that the fuel is available, hopefully already, but we'll make sure it's available for entry into service of the operator. But for sure, we'd be keen to engage with other parties involved in SAF or whatever it is to see if there are synergies that help drive it forward.
So basically, Todd, reach out to James.
Yeah, we have a booth, an expo booth, and I think infrastructure does as well as a team. So feel free to reach out. We're happy to answer any questions and get engaged offline.
Thank you.
It's probably just to follow on, James, as well. Same, obviously not for Todd, but the same goes for, I'm sure Tim would share the same sentiment. If there are people that do want to reach out, where we're not sort of closed off, it's all hands on deck at the moment. So if anybody from the audience does want to reach out directly, do just drop us a message on LinkedIn or by email or something, and we're open to all sort of solutions at the moment. So yeah, more than happy to engage with the wider ecosystem to start solving the problem.
Absolutely. And I think, Linnea, it goes back to that point you made about chicken and egg. This is exactly the type of collaboration, fostering partnerships that we need to try and solve some of those problems. Because where you have operators like EcoJet who will need a supply of hydrogen, Monty as well can come and finance or lease the aircraft. James and the team at ZeroAvia can help with the production and the supply. You really need all of those groups working together to actually help drive this forward. Because I think without some of these key parts, there will not be the investment necessarily into hydrogen production. There will not be that security of supply, because you need the airlines to clearly have that demand. And I think on top of that, where one thing we're seeing is where there will be ancillary industries that maybe might utilize hydrogen, that also helps to combat that chicken and egg problem. Because if you can start to show that there is a demand for this fuel source, that then encourages investment, that can encourage the build out of this ecosystem. And we think that's really important.
Thank you. We are just about running out of time. I will just end with a question from Evros. And he asks, how far out in ZeroAvia's plans do you see narrow body applications, James, I would imagine? And then for narrow bodies, focus on retrofit as opposed to clean sheet designs, which would also be more your domain, James, to start with, I think.
Yeah, that's a tough question. So I think, we have a roadmap for the technology. As I mentioned, we start with the 600 kilowatt for the 19-seat aircraft, aiming to type certify at the end of 25. We're already quite way forward with the sort of next step up, which is the 2 to 5 megawatt system that'll do up to sort of 90-seat aircraft. So we're developing the high temperature fuel cells, the liquefied hydrogen that gets us that step up. But we'll also learn from the 600 kilowatt engine as we get that into operation and start to see how we can improve and develop. So all those things are in play. The large system is already on ground test with a prop attached. Started that earlier this year. So small and large turboprop is very much on our horizon, with the first large turboprop being 2027. But for sure, the narrow body technology will be available for narrow body aircraft at the end of this decade. But it's up to us to demonstrate the viability of the technology for narrow body as when we get to it. So we have to prove that we can get to that stage in that time frame. So I think that will evolve over time. But for us, beyond the large turboprop, we've already got preliminary work on the sort of ducted fan version of our system. So we already have an eye on how we get to the narrow body, and our intent is to work with the airframers. And our whole strategy has been to retrofit, first of all, because that way we get in, the fleet up there quicker, and also there's a lot of aircraft in service today. So retrofit is our strategy, but always with an eye on then moving to line fit, which all our agreements have. For sure, with that narrow body size of aircraft, there are huge advantages in utilizing changes in the aircraft design to make best use of the new technology. So, the fuel, for example, so modified aircraft design can incorporate that technology. And Airbus announced a hydrogen strategy. It's definitely their direction. They're already working on fuel storage on board the aircraft and preparing to flight test such things, as are we. So the narrow body is a real opportunity, as I say, for us, end of the decade, but we've not yet signed a firm agreement with an airframer to deliver that on a narrow body, but we'll have the technology available, and we'll definitely get on board those aircraft.
Start small, plan big.
Absolutely.
And with that, our time is up. Thank you so much for a very interesting and rewarding conversation. And please, audience, do stick around, because there's more to come on the first zero-emission aircraft. and what these will be in the next session of the summit. So thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Earl.
you. Yeah, thank you, Linnea. That was fantastic. I think you called us, you called ZeroAvia the spider at the center of the web, which I think was a compliment. But no, but fantastic stuff. I will also say that we read our poll. 63% of people are confident that Europe will be the center of the first commercial zero-emission hydrogen-fueled flights, which I think is good news for Brent. Maybe we can the UK we still count as Europe. I think can be at the forefront of the revolution. So and I think a lot of what Brent was covering as well, and the team, you know, people who are interested in the idea that they could buy a ticket on the first flight will be super interested with our next panel. So we're going to be looking at clean regional aviation, zero-emission aircraft, and the timeline to the clean domestic sky. So when can we be flying passengers on 80-seat aircraft like the Dash 8 and the ATR, and even larger? And exactly how does that all come about? So we'll come back in about 5 minutes time. We're going to take a short break, and then we'll be live for our session 7 on that topic. So do join us then. Thank you.